In a world filled with cruelty, sometimes the fiercest of fighters can become the gentlest protectors. This is the story of Bruno, a fighting dog turned hero, whose instincts led him to a fragile, abandoned baby, a moment that would change both their lives forever. Bruno had been wandering for days, hunger gnawing at him, when an unfamiliar scent reached his nose. Expecting prey, he stalked forward, only to find a tiny, helpless baby wrapped in old blankets, crying weakly. Bruno's instincts were conflicted. Part of him was ready to move on, but another, much deeper feeling made him stay. His hunger faded into the background as a powerful urge to protect took over. Bruno lay beside the baby, curling his large body around it to keep it warm. The chill of night crept in, but Bruno remained steadfast, his body shielding the baby as the cries grew weaker. He knew they needed water, food, and shelter, but most of all, they needed each other. Through the darkening landscape, Bruno carried the child, his legs trembling with exhaustion. His heart pounded with determination, refusing to give in to weakness. Eventually, he found a small creek, where both he and the baby could find relief from the harsh journey. A bond was forming, stronger than hunger, more profound than fear. Later that night, Bruno stumbled upon an abandoned cabin. It wasn't much, crumbling and worn from years of neglect, but it was enough to shield them from the elements. Bruno gently placed the baby down and wrapped himself around it, guarding the little one as they both drifted into an uneasy sleep. He awoke to an unfamiliar noise, the soft crunch of footsteps through the underbrush. Instinctively, Bruno rose, ready to defend the baby, his heart pounding as a pair of yellow eyes emerged from the shadows. Coyotes. Hunger and exhaustion faded into a primal need to protect. Bruno faced them, growling, standing his ground despite the odds. A fierce battle ensued. 3 coyotes against 1 dog, weakened and wounded. Bruno fought with every last bit of strength, refusing to yield until finally the coyotes retreated, their hunger no match for his unwavering resolve. He turned back to the baby, his protective instincts intact, nudging the child softly to ensure it was safe. As dawn broke, Bruno's ordeal wasn't over yet. The pair were exhausted, wounded, and alone until a miracle happened. A woman, drawn by the distant cries and the cabin's silhouette in the fog, approached cautiously. She found herself face to face with Bruno, the scarred, battle-worn dog, standing guard over a fragile, abandoned child. Compassion in her eyes, she spoke softly, her voice soothing, filled with understanding. Bruno, sensing her gentle intentions, allowed her closer. Emergency services were called, and soon they arrived, sirens echoing through the clearing. The paramedics approached carefully, recognizing Bruno's fierce loyalty. Bruno watched as they took the baby, his exhaustion finally catching up to him, his body weakening. Yet, even as they lifted him onto a stretcher, he kept his eyes on the child, ensuring its safety until his consciousness faded. Word of Bruno's incredible journey spread quickly. The media called him a hero, and people were moved by his bravery, a fierce fighter who had chosen to protect rather than harm. As the days passed, Bruno recovered in the hospital, his body healing, though his thoughts were always on the child he had saved. It wasn't long before a young couple, who had recently faced heartbreak over not being able to have children, heard of the story. They felt an immediate connection to the child, and to the dog that had protected it against all odds. When they came to visit, Bruno felt an instant sense of belonging. The couple, now looking at both him and the baby, made a choice that would change Bruno's life once more. They brought Bruno into their family. The baby, their child, reached out, tiny fingers brushing Bruno's fur, and he felt warmth and belonging unlike anything he'd ever known. He had a family now, a home, and a purpose. In the weeks and months that followed, Bruno lived surrounded by love. He watched over the baby every night, his powerful frame a gentle shield. He had transformed from a dog built to fight into a guardian whose heart had been healed by the very life he had saved. The baby grew strong and healthy, giggling as it played with Bruno, whose once battered heart now swelled with love and peace. Bruno's journey from abandoned fighter to cherished family member became a quiet legend, a reminder of the power of loyalty and the unexpected bonds that change our lives. He had shown that even the fiercest among us can be transformed by kindness and love. And as he lay beside the baby in the backyard, watching the sun set over their safe, happy home, Bruno knew one thing for certain. He was home, and he was loved. One day, as Bruno lay in the backyard, the baby, now a toddler, waddled over to him, giggling with delight. The toddler's small hands patted Bruno's fur, and Bruno responded with a gentle nuzzle, his eyes filled with warmth. The mother watched from the porch, her heart swelling with love at the sight of her child and Bruno, their protector and friend. The family often took Bruno and the toddler on walks through the nearby woods, the same woods where Bruno had once fought for their survival. Now, those woods were filled with laughter and joy. Bruno walked proudly beside the stroller, always alert, always protective. The father would sometimes kneel beside Bruno, scratching behind his ears and say, "You're our hero, Bruno." Bruno would look up, his eyes reflecting a deep sense of fulfillment. Seasons changed, and the bond between Bruno and the family only grew stronger. On winter nights, Bruno would lie by the fireplace, the toddler curled up against his side, both of them warm and content. The parents would sit nearby, watching the flames dance, grateful for the love and protection Bruno brought into their lives. One spring morning, the family decided to visit the cabin where it had all begun. They wanted to show the toddler the place where Bruno had saved a life and forged an unbreakable bond. As they approached the cabin, Bruno's ears perked up, recognizing the place. He walked ahead, his steps steady, leading the way. The cabin, though still worn and crumbling, held a sense of history for them, a place where love had triumphed over fear. They spent the day near the cabin, sharing a picnic and playing in the clearing. The toddler, full of energy, ran around while Bruno watched, his eyes never leaving the child. The parents sat together, their hands intertwined, feeling the weight of gratitude for everything that had led them to this moment. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the clearing, the family gathered their things, ready to head home. Bruno looked back at the cabin one last time, his heart full. He had come a long way, from a fighter abandoned and alone to a protector cherished and loved. With the family by his side, he turned and walked away, knowing that his journey had brought him to where he truly belonged. Bruno was no longer just a dog who had survived. He was a hero, a guardian, and most importantly, a beloved member of a family. And as they made their way back home, Bruno knew that his days of wandering were over. He was home, and he was loved now and always. Months later, the family found themselves preparing for yet another significant change. The mother was expecting a new baby, and the house was filled with excitement and anticipation. Bruno seemed to sense the change, often laying his head gently on the mother's lap, his eyes full of curiosity and affection. He would follow her around the house, ever watchful, ever protective. When the baby finally arrived, Bruno was introduced carefully. The parents brought the newborn close, and Bruno sniffed the tiny bundle, his eyes filled with wonder. He nuzzled the baby softly, his heart swelling with a familiar sense of loyalty and love. The toddler, now a big sibling, clapped with joy as Bruno gently lay down beside the baby, as if to say, "I will protect this one too." Life became even more vibrant in the household. Bruno now had 2 children to watch over, and he took his role seriously. He would lie beside the crib, his ears perked for any sound, always ready to offer comfort. The toddler, no longer the smallest, would sit beside Bruno, their little hands resting on his back, the two of them watching over the new baby together. The days turned into weeks, and the family adjusted to their new rhythm. Bruno's heart seemed to grow with every passing day, filled with the love of his family. The mother and father often looked at Bruno with gratitude, knowing they could not have asked for a better protector for their children. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, the toddler and the baby both asleep, the parents sat close to Bruno. The father scratched behind Bruno's ears, his voice soft with emotion. "You've given us so much, Bruno," he said. "You've protected us, loved us, and made our family complete." Bruno looked up at him, his eyes shining with understanding. He knew he was where he was meant to be. The journey that had begun with hunger and loneliness had led him to this, a life filled with warmth, laughter, and an unbreakable bond with those he loved. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Bruno lay down, his head resting on his paws, content. He closed his eyes, the soft breathing of his family surrounding him. He was home, and he was loved, now, always, and forever.